Today we continue our Lenten worship series, Land, Lament, and Liberation. In this series, we're attempting to identify distorted Christian theologies that have been used to justify the theft of land, the erasure of cultures, and the abuse of indigenous peoples. In our church's land acknowledgement statement, we have committed to educating ourselves and to confronting those distorted theologies within our faith tradition. So this series is a part of that. Last week we began by unsettling the story of dominion, loosening the deep assumptions that we have inherited about land and ownership and entitlement. We named that even when we reject domination theology in theory, it can continue to shape how we live. This week, we move from land to power. And to lead us into our focus today is a Texan, not me, another Texan. There are many Texans. There's a Democrat in Texas who is getting a lot of attention lately. His name is James Tallarico. He is a state representative now. He is a state representative now, but he's running for U.S. Senate in Texas. And what makes him unique, one of the things at least, is that he is a student at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. He is Christian, and he leads with his faith. Recently, Ezra Klein from the New York Times interviewed Tallarico. The interview is easy to find, and it's well worth listening to the entire thing. But right now, we're just going to listen to a short excerpt, a couple of minutes, because it happens to be a great lead-in to our topic today.
For those unfamiliar with the term, what is Christian nationalism?
You can define it a lot of different ways. I define it as the worship of power in the name of Christ. I define it that way because I want us to see it as part of a very long tradition.
How do they define it? They being the people who would self-identify with it.
I would think they would define it as wanting a Christian nation. But again, these politicians want a Christian nation unless it means providing health care to the sick, or funding food assistance for the hungry, or raising the minimum wage for the poor. And so it seems like they want to base our laws on the Bible until they read the words of Jesus. Welcome the stranger. Liberate the oppressed. Put away your sword. Sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor. I mean, I'm not exactly sure a Christian nation is really what these people want. Again, I believe the separation of church and state is sacred. I think a nation with one supreme religion is not just un-American. I also think it's un-Christian, given how Jesus taught about religious supremacy. But I do think if these people are going to call for a Christian nation, they need to reach for all of it. And that is, I've fought the bill to require the Ten Commandments posted in every classroom. And I've often wondered, instead of posting the Ten Commandments in every classroom, why don't they post money is the root of all evil in every boardroom? Why don't they post do not judge in every courtroom? Why don't they post turn the other cheek in the halls of the Pentagon? Or it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. This is the inconsistency I'm trying to call out, because they're using my tradition. They're speaking for me. And so I think I have a special moral responsibility to combat Christian nationalism wherever I see it.
Imagine that we are in agreement that Christian nationalism is distorted theology. And I'm talking about this congregation right now, the great many people who believe that it is not distorted. But as Tallarico said, attempts to align Christian faith with governmental power is a long tradition. It's taken many forms through the years, one of which is the doctrine of discovery that will be our topic next Sunday. But it's really important that we understand the biblical sources to support an anti-Christian nationalist view. So let's look at the Bible. In Matthew's gospel, before Jesus' public ministry begins, he goes into the wilderness for 40 days. And in our sacred myth from Matthew, Jesus is tempted by the devil. He is offered 3 temptations. First, turn these stones into bread to prove that you are the Son of God. The second, throw yourself down from the temple so the angels will catch you. And third, bow to me and I will give you all the kingdoms of the world. Now think about those temptations. Turn these stones into bread is a temptation to control material resources. Throw yourself down from the temple, well, that is about religious spectacle. Bow to me and I will give you the kingdoms of the world is about controlling political authority. These are not random temptations. Jesus is being offered empire. Control the economy, control the narrative, control the nations. And every time, what does Jesus say? No, he refuses. He refuses to use his power to exploit hunger. He refuses to use his power to manipulate belief. He refuses to use his power to rule over others. Jesus is rejecting domination. But he's not rejecting power itself, because power can be used to exploit or to nourish. It can be used to control or to heal, to conquer or to liberate. The temptation in the wilderness is not only about Jesus' personal morality. It's bigger than that. It is about what kind of Messiah Jesus will be. Will he be the kind who conquers or the kind who liberates? Jesus chooses liberation. There's also the story from Luke's gospel that we referenced last week. Jesus enters the synagogue in Nazareth. He unrolls the scroll of the prophet Isaiah and he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he sits down and he says, "Today, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." Now, this is understood as Jesus' public declaration of his mission. And notice what is not in that mission. There is no conquest. There's no territorial expansion. There's no forced conversion. There's no cultural domination of any kind. There is only liberation. Good news for the poor, freedom for the captive, healing for the wounded, release for the oppressed. That is the gospel, first according to Isaiah, and then according to Jesus. So how did a movement centered on liberation become entangled with empire? Well, part of the answer is history. We might answer that question in that way. But I'd like to focus on a different aspect. Because part of the answer is temptation. The same temptation that Jesus faced in the wilderness has shown up again and again across centuries. We're seeing it again now in the language and energy of Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism tells a story that sounds at first like faithfulness. It uses words like God and nation and freedom and heritage. Beneath that language is a familiar assumption that Christianity is meant to hold power over a nation. Christianity is meant to define the identity of a nation, to control its laws, to secure its dominance. It's a vision of faith that is anxious about losing control. It imagines God's purposes are best protected through political dominance. It confuses cultural influence with spiritual faithfulness. And it resonates with the wilderness temptation. All of the authority I will give to you. Christian nationalism says, take the kingdoms, secure them, protect them, rule them in God's name. But Jesus said no. The contrast could not be sharper. Christian nationalism seeks control of the nation. Jesus proclaims good news to the poor. Christian nationalism seeks to enforce belief. Jesus invites transformation. Christian nationalism draws boundaries around who belongs. Jesus breaks boundaries to restore the excluded. Christian nationalism measures success by power and influence. Jesus is concerned with liberation and love. One seeks to protect dominance. The other seeks to set people free. These are not the same gospel. In the Tallarico interview, I'm not crazy about his use of us and them language, so I want to be very clear. This sermon is not about shaming individuals or contributing to an us versus them dynamic. God knows we have enough of that out there already, and I have no wish to further that way of thinking. The truth is, we all live in a culture that equates power with control. We all feel the pull of certainty, security, safety, and belonging. So the question is not, who is the bad Christian? The question is, which way of power are we choosing to follow? Because even those of us who reject Christian nationalism can still carry its assumptions in ways that we may not realize. We can still believe that being right is more important than being in relationship. We can still try to manage outcomes instead of letting go and trusting. We can still center our own comfort instead of listening to marginalized voices and helping to amplify them. The temptation toward domination is not limited to any one group. It is a human temptation. And Jesus shows us another way. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to bring good news to the poor, release to the captives, to let the oppressed go free. That is not a platform of control. That is a practice of liberation. Liberation always honors the sacred worth and agency of the other. Which means that any expression of Christianity that depends on coercion, exclusion, or domination, even if it uses the name Jesus, it is drifted from the heart of the gospel. Last week we asked ourselves, where do I hold power? And how do I use my power? Do I use my power to secure control or to create spaciousness for life? Do I use my power to draw lines or to build relationships? Do I use my power to protect my place at the center or to participate in the flourishing of those who are pushed to the margins? The path of Jesus is open to us. It is slower than empire. It's less certain than control. It requires humility, listening, patience, and courage. But it leads to life, to shared life, to abundant life. As we continue this Lenten series, this journey together, we are gently loosening the soil of domination within ourselves first. Loosening the fear that tells us that we must control in order to survive. Loosening the stories that say power is proven by who we can command and who we can exclude. And in that newly loosened ground, something else can take root. A different vision of power. Power that nourishes rather than exploits. Power that listens rather than silences. Power that heals, restores, and sets free. So may we walk this Lenten path with courage, laying down the need to control, opening ourselves to transformation, and choosing again and again the power that makes room for everyone to live with abundance.